Test.
I'm not supposed to be logged into Zoom.
Recording in progress.
Great, and so I'm bringing up my computer right now. Sorry, I'm a little delayed.
And Chair, do you mind just checking your microphone one more time? Can hear the
Oh,
audio.
is it not working? Or maybe I wasn't deep enough to it. Is that
Pick-
better?
Are we picking that up? Yep, okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so the first thing, right, correct me if I'm wrong, is we need to approve the minutes from the last 2 months.
We'll start with the roll call. Get
Oh,
everybody
that's
in on
right.
record.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Marianne Berticelli,
Here.
Mary Kate DeLuco,
Here.
Stacy Earle,
Here.
Kate Greenspan,
Here.
Megan Kelly, Hannah Rizzo Simmons,
Here.
Karen Now.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I believe if there's any general public comments to be had that aren't on any agenda items.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We had one public comment that came in before that was posted on the agenda. There are no public comments.
Okay, so then we will go to item 1, which is approval of minutes from both February 15th and March 15th. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes for February 15th?
I motion to approve. I second.
Great. And for March 15th?
I motion to approve.
Second.
Excellent. All right, we will move on to item number 2. This is the 2023-24 Parks and Recreation Operational Overview and Recommendations for Prioritized Investments. Drew and Cindy, would you like to take it away?
We would. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for filling in tonight. We appreciate it. We're really excited to be talking to you all tonight about not just the upcoming 2023-2024 prioritized investment recommendations, but also take an opportunity to look at the Parks and Recreation Department operations overall. This is something that we feel is important, especially this year as we've gone through and been several projects have been getting a lot of attention. This is really an exciting time before City Council sees the budget on May 8th through their workshop to have a conversation not just centered on the Parks Measure M, which it had been focused on the last couple of years, but to take a step back and look at more of a holistic view of everything. So with that, I'm going to walk us through this. We'll start kind of at a big picture. I've got Rachel Beer, our Recreation Supervisor, and Cindy Chong, our Superintendent of Parks and Facilities, that are going to take a couple of slides. But for the most part, I'll be your flight attendant for the beginning and end of this. So let's go to next slide, please. So when we're looking for feedback tonight, there's not going to be an action or a recommendation tonight. As a commission, what we're seeking for is input along the way, specifically as it aligns to Parks and Rec's current needs as you see them, the established categories of prioritized investment, which we established through kind of the outreach ahead of the Parks Measure M initiative, but constantly revisit. And then we've also got a lens to look through our initiatives through the city council goals and priorities, which get adopted on a 2-year work plan. So those are kind of the 3 lenses or buckets we're really looking for your feedback and input on. And again, there may be others, but these are the 3 that we really wanted to focus on. Thank you. Next slide. Now, it is important, this is in draft form. These numbers are pretty fresh, but more so it's the what, it's the concepts, it's the input around the types of programs, projects that you see fit, and really just the holistic view of not just projects, but operations as well that we're going to be looking at. City Council has the sole responsibility to approve the budget and appropriate the funds. That's their role. Staff will administer the budget, is responsible for that, accountable for it. And committees and commissions really help staff, management, and the council prioritize program areas, ensure the mission alignment, review and inform project elements as they come up specifically, and support really in the outreach and community engagement, which the city's making a lot of efforts to really bolster in the last year. Thank you. Next slide, please. So with that, we'll kind of start with the big picture. The general fund is traditionally what parks and recreation operations fall under. General fund within cities allow kind of those core essential services to occur. That includes police, fire, kind of your general community developments, parks and recreation, et cetera. General funds are collected through a majority of different means. I think the big thing to remember is taxes is a big portion of that. It's likely around 50% of your general fund is a combination of different taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, et cetera. But the other revenues that feed into the general fund are fees and assessments and services. So as cities try to close the gap from tax revenues, they're collecting them in services that we provide or fees and assessments on different activity. So that's kind of all fade into the general fund. And then we've got a number of special revenues that is a bucket. And the revenues included below here are those particularly as they relate to parks and recreation operations. So at times we see dedicated parks funds like a Measure M, but we also see kind of general special use revenues like a transit occupancy tax or referred to as the TOT, which is essentially taxes on hotels and beds. The Measure U, which was the recently approved general sales tax citywide, that 1 cent sales tax. Parkland impact fees, which are fees assessed to developers as property gets developed. There was the one-time use of funds through the ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act, and bond refinancing. When the city refinances bonds, those savings get used to fund things like playground replacement projects. It's also important to note here, there's a number of grants right now that this Parks and Recreation Department is administering, like the Prop 68 grant that will help fund the initial phases of the Kenilworth Park project, which you'll hear about. CAL FIRE grants, which there are a number as well that we're administering. And so grants are always opportunities that staff are looking at and reviewing as a potential revenue source, either tied to projects or aligned with current kind of missions and initiatives. Next slide, please. So this is the pie, the general fund pie. And as you see here, you've really got public safety, which is pretty typical, not unique to Petaluma. It takes about 70% of your general fund, and the remaining kind of divisions, departments are split within that 30%. So Parks and Recreation here, their operations are primarily funded through the general fund, and so we're at about 8% of that pie, that city pie of general fund. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite representations because it's like Parks and Recreation comes in peace. Crickets there. Okay. But it really is quite kind of illustrative that Parks and Recreation is that kind of left brain, right brain. And it is a very kind of even split here in Petaluma, with that third pie being not just parks and recreation facilities, but building facility maintenance division. This includes all city facilities that has maintenance provisions that's attached to this department. So that is the pie. And then as we get through the next few kind of portions of that, the left brain, right brain, I'm going to have Rachel Beard walk through our recreation services division. So Rachel, you can take on the next one.
Great, thank you, Drew. So you'll see here in our recreation services pie, there's about 10 different areas, with the majority being in our admin, and that encompasses all of our full-time staff as well as our part-time staff that run all of the programs on the kind of other half of our pie, which is our facilities, our programs, our special events, our senior center, library, museum, classes. And so you'll see that the majority of the fund is for our staff that are running all of our programs and our facilities. And I'll kick it over to Cindy for our parks.
1 minute, please. Programming in place. Thank you kindly, Drew. Yes, so parks maintenance, as you'll see, there's only 3 pieces to my pie. And 2 of those are really, they don't change from year to year much unless you're adding on to staffing, but salary and benefits is the largest part of our pie. You have a park staff of 9, which includes your supervisor. And then utilities are a fixed cost. That's, as water, lights, gas, all of those things that fills into our utilities. We don't get to adjust those or pull out of those. Services and supplies, really, that's where anything you need to maintain anything in any of your parks. So whether tree maintenance, go for maintenance. Turf maintenance, you need to fix the light. You need to replace the light pole. You need to replace a controller. That's where that money pulls from. Now, the hope is, right, as we expand our acreage, which we've done over the years, that pie would be able to grow. Over the past, we've seen that hasn't happened as much. But we're hoping that as, we're looking at our amenities and what we need to do, that will. So for the next year, you have $436,000 that we'll be pulling from to do all of our maintenance. And there are 47 parks. So to think about that in the acreage, it's not that much money. I mean, if you were to hand that to me personally and put it into my bank account, it'd be a large sum of money. But to do the maintenance that your team handles, it's actually not really that much of the city pie. So just to be aware of that. Next slide, please. And so the other part is city facilities maintenance. And we don't speak about that as much here at the Parks and Rec Commission. But once again, you have the three pieces of the pie. 2 are, pretty set. Currently you have 2 employees that handle all of the maintenance for 50 plus city facilities. So it's a lot. And a lot of times what I'll tell you with parks maintenance, what's not known is that routine maintenance is really different from any project work. So if we have anybody, say in this building, that says, we want a bottle filling station put in, that's project work and not routine or scheduled maintenance. So that pulls maybe from what the routine would be. So we have to prioritize. But your $282,000 there that's allocated is for maintenance for any service contracts we may have, for any replacements of HVAC systems. We do have some ARPA funds that are going to help with that for this year, but in the past, we've had to pull from that very, very small pie. So a lot of times what will happen at this time of year, some of those fixed costs may increase. We've seen this in the last year. I know you probably have seen the effects of it when you're shopping, but it affects us too when we're out buying materials or any goods. We really have to review and kind of prioritize the needs there. So comprises your facilities maintenance team for the city. They are mighty team of 2 doing a lot of good work.
All right, thank you, Cindy. So now, after the operational kind of overview, I want to bring folks back to what you see here, which was the prioritized categories of investment as we look at our not just our parks and recreation priorities, but this really reflects that robust outreach and community engagement we did following Measure M and really kind of been our playbook as how we align those investment priorities with these kind of categories and these buckets of investment. So we're going to come back to this list following the recommended investments so you can kind of see and illustrate how those align. But these are always something in another kind of way and a lens that we look through when we're evaluating grants to go after or opportunities to leverage resources, partnerships to form. How can we bring it back to this and really demonstrate that we're over time creating a well-balanced investment in our parks programs and people. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are now at a point where we're looking ahead, and this is where things get really exciting. Our budget, our financial forecast as we headed into this year's budget season called for departments to keep budgets flat, meaning that financial forecasts, even with utilities that are raising in rates, to keep other kind of expenditures flat. And so that was kind of the playbook that we were tasked with when we looked at our budgets. And a number of every departments have needs, and our jobs are to recommend those needs. And what we did was, really try to, manifest into the programs and projects, address those needs that we know our community wants. And this is the exciting part where this is not tied to any Measure M or special revenues, but these are funding enhancements above the baseline operations, meaning these are specific investments in parks that go beyond what that flat budget are, so improvements on there. So, these are the tree care and tree preservation program. We had a budget this year of, $50,000, which we, quickly found out that, that's not going to be enough to really get to where our community wants and deserves our tree programs to be. So we have $120,000 here that's been supported and we're recommending bring forward, which is huge. A grazing program in our parks and open spaces. We're excited to bring that pilot program up now with current funds, but we really were hoping to build off that momentum and grow it. And we're doing that in a way that I think is really exciting and an important story to tell. The gopher abatement, which you all are well aware of, you see it every day in these parks, and there's a program currently underway to really go after about four of the most active athletic fields now. But again, sustaining that program over next year, this is really an exciting opportunity to do that. We know we don't know exactly the finite detail of our integrated pest management plan, but we know it's moving towards more manual weed abatement technique. So additional funds here to sustain that program, not through just staffing, but services as well, and have that cushion to really keep up and resource that area was important. And we're excited to be recommending that. And then lastly, having more playable ball fields, natural grass fields here in Petaluma is important, and that comes with equipment, that comes with staffing, and there's some investment in that area too. So exciting slide here for us. Wanted to pull out the staffing recommendations as well. All departments have needs. This is in draft form, but again, very, very exciting to get support for adding some new positions within the department. One is that facility maintenance supervisor, which has been lacking for more than a decade. We've had a reduced facilities maintenance staff of 2, and this would allow that critical supervisor position to help organize workflows, build more of that routine versus reactionary facilities maintenance program that Cindy mentioned. And then park maintenance, every position is so critical. One full-time position equals about 10% of increase of workforce. So really excited about that. Also being recommended in this year's budget is some building our capacity to drive a lot of these projects, initiatives, new grant opportunities, partnerships through a deputy director. and we are 2 years into a reconstituted Parks and Recreation Department, and this is a really important position that we wanted to put forward as a recommendation to really kind of launch us as we look at some of these exciting projects and programs to really build off that momentum. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide represents the Measure M priority and recommendations as it relates to, you'll see in the budget book, as we separate the capital improvements, infrastructure, and the increased park maintenance, which is seasonal and staff to maintain parks, and then that kind of not discretionary, but that flexible, enhanced services, repairs, supplies, et cetera. When a slide breaks here, or you need a contract for this, you have some flush money there. But we'll talk about the capital and improvement infrastructure projects in the next few slides. But what you'll see this year is it's a really heavy recommendations on that capital infrastructure and a couple of key projects. So that's as it relates to Measure M, just a visual, and there's a couple other ways we'll show that. Next slide, please. This slide competes for equally the most exciting slide, I feel. This breaks down some of these the balance of initiatives, I feel, but also just the amount of investment that we're recommending and seeing in our parks and recreation this year. To start with the Petaluma Community Sports Fields. That sports fields complex, as you're aware, and we saw many of you at the groundbreaking, is underway. It's under construction. I would say they're round in first base, coming into second base currently. There's been some delays with the projects. The weather was pretty significant this year, et cetera, but the contract that was awarded was pulled out a lot of some of the basic amenities that a facility complex, or the only facility complex dedicated baseball field in a community our size would really need. And that includes sports lighting primarily. That includes bleachers. It includes restrooms, concession stands, and things like that. Now, up to this point, there hasn't been any Measure M investment in that project, and what we're recommending is a $300,000 combination Measure M, and then a $500,000 allocation from TOT to equal $800,000 towards that project. So it's a lot of money. It's a big ask, and to put into perspective, it represents $800,000 of a $5.4 million project now, but one that when completed will probably be around $7.4 million. So with that $800,000, the priorities from the user groups have been clear that it's sports lighting. That's one thing that's critical for groups, as many of you know, as you age out of Little League from 13 to 19, the older you get, the more often you're playing nights, and that's kind of the reality of the sport. So it's so critical for them to have those lights. And we really see this baseball field as being a regional draw, not just a local draw, allowing groups to play on weekends, not traveling out of town, but also solicit groups coming into town is really important, and that's why the money would be used for bleachers and stadium seating as well. So that's an exciting project. And then the Lucchese Skate Park project we're calling now, after the support from this commission as well as City Council on the selection of Lucchese as the preferred site, that project has really taken off, and we're excited to support a pretty large influx of parkland impact fees in the tune of $650,000 combined with the existing fees to bring that up to a very healthy state, or a phase one construction build of that project, which has really taken off recently. I'm going to go down and talk about the swim center replastering. This is a pool that desperately needs a replastering. So that money will essentially, replaster the 50-meter outdoor pool, Petaluma's only public outdoor swim center. And it's just a critical resource, and one that we're really excited to move forward and have funding recommendation for that. We have money set aside to refurbish or renovate the restroom concession stands at Prince. That is some money there without a design, but we feel with a design or renovation, we wanted some money to be ready to engage in that project when possible. And then moving across, the Schoelberger Amphitheater is moving close to the end of design, and as those engineering estimates get updated, we feel about $35,000 of additional fees is really what it's going to take to deliver on that project. And then we are paying down the pickleball and tennis renovation loan. We resurfaced, reconstructed seven courts in one year, and we did that with an interfund loan in the initial stage of Measure M. So we're paying that loan off through, I think, 2029. Next slide, please. So we're going to present the investment categories back to you now here and show you kind of how the investment priorities align with those categories. So I'm not going to walk through the whole list, but these are Measure M, non-Measure M, all those other special revenues. These are not a complete and comprehensive list, but it's really meant to illustrate kind of the balance and the diversity of the funds and how we're kind of leveraging other funds and sources to make sure that we're touching on a lot of these areas in any given year. Any year, one priority may be higher than the other, and that's kind of the nature of projects of different scale. But again, the goal here is over the lifetime of Measure M, or to have a tool that we can constantly check back in, that we can always move it back to this kind of mission and alignment here. Next slide, please. So this is another view of just how the capital investments in parks are proposed. And again, this combines all of those funding sources, but as you see it here, again, different projects have different scales and scopes, but overall, this is just represents a tremendous investment in our parks, and really excited to be recommending, hear your input on it and recommending this here tonight. Next slide. So just to bring it back, feedback that we were looking for tonight is input on these categories of investment, any feedback on how this information can best be presented, how we can get outreach and support of some of these projects, or anything else the commission kind of deems important for staff to hear. We will incorporate this input, this feedback, ultimately into staff's report and recommendations that go to City Council on May 8th for the budget workshop. So that report's not been finalized, but that's why we're here tonight, is to offer a chance to weigh in, provide some input, and that input we can carry with us forward. Thank you. Is there one more? Okay. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, so any clarifying questions on any of this?
Yes.
Commissioner Berticelli.
I am not clear on how the whole building and facility maintenance piece of that works. You have your own building and facilities maintenance staff that just works for Park and Rec, doing the structural maintenance essentially on your buildings, or is that part of Public Works, or you have a separate unit?
So, do you want me?
Yeah,
I'll
go
go
ahead.
ahead and answer that. So we have the facilities maintenance team, and the purview for facilities maintenance for any city facility falls under my umbrella. So under Parks and Rec, it's not just parks related, it's any city facility, any structure.
That seems kind of odd to me. Why wouldn't maintenance of city property be, what does Public Works do? I guess I'm not clear on that. Do they just do streets, or what do they?
Streets, utilities, wastewater, capital improvement program is all under Public Works. So before you came on board, has it been 2 years, Drew? Maybe not quite 2 years. Parks maintenance, facilities maintenance, landscape assessment districts were under Public Works. And then when Parks and Recreation came back to be a department, I moved lock, stock, and barrel. So when I say I, the areas that I oversee moved over to Parks and Recreation. So with that came facilities. In the way that it was set up, we didn't change anything about how facilities was handled. And I do think that you're correct, and it depends on the municipality. Some places, facilities maintenance lives in public works. Some places, it's community development. Sometimes parks, structures, and facilities only fall to the parks team. In the city of Petaluma, we have it all under one umbrella. So generally, your parks maintenance team, they do maintain a lot of the structures in city parks, but if it's, say, like the community center, they don't, right? That's the facilities team. But if it's the restroom, they're going to be the first one to get the call out, right? To see if there's issues with the toilet or the sink or the lights. If it's something outside of their scope and because they don't have that trade specialization, then they would work with the facilities team and we'd call in a contractor if it's beyond what we can handle.
Okay.
I think that's an important point to make is, beyond that routine maintenance, there's a lot of collaboration that has to happen daily with Public Works because of the capital improvements program division that lives there. And a lot of the projects underway under facilities, have to come back to circle back to incorporate those maintenance needs, but also some of those projects for maintenance quickly turn into capital. So that's where it's a challenge for staff because that you have to kind of have those really tight-knit coordination to deliver on timely projects. But yes, I see your point. It's got to live somewhere, and lucky for Cindy, facilities maintenance is with us.
Okay. And do you feel like you have a appropriate budget for maintaining all of the city properties that you're responsible for?
Appropriate?
Well,
I would
does
say
it
that
allow
we're
you to-
underfunded and under-resourced, if you were to ask me, based on just the facilities assessment that we had done 3 years ago. We know we're sorely in deferred maintenance on our facilities. And on the park side too, as with the discussions we've had, we know overall it is under-resourced to provide. I would say it depends on the level of service you want to provide.
Right.
I would like to provide a higher level of service. If you ask me personally, I would like to see more support so that I can provide that. My staff and I can support that.
And does is the budget for facilities maintenance a separate chunk of money from park maintenance?
Yes.
Does one go to support the other at all, or are they completely?
What I will tell you is there's shared resources in the sense of staffing. So if my facility staff responds to something that is in a park or parks needs assistance with, we don't charge back to the park's budget, right? Those hours. But if there's any materials or a contractor called in, then that's paid out of the park's budget. So there is shared resources in a way, but the budgets are separate.
Okay. Oh, I had one other question. Does the park department have a dedicated budget from year to year? So could you basically look ahead 10 years and make a 10-year plan knowing that you're going to have a minimum operating budget each year?
So generally,
I'll take this one.
Okay, go ahead.
So we review an annual budget through city council every year. We don't have a 2-year program as some communities do. So every year we bring forward budget recommendations based on kind of financial forecasts. I will say there are, we have to be careful. There are provisions in the Measure M, Parks Measure, for example, that while those are broad spending categories that are appropriate for use as Measure M, it's important in order to accept those funds, we have to maintain what they call the maintenance of effort. So there's a baseline year of 2017 or 2019 of Parks and Recreation, and that's a snapshot. And if we were ever to go below that baseline, then we may risk being eligible to collect Measure M. So that's kind of that baseline year. And then as utilities and staffing, et cetera, increase each and every year, we have to have that conversation. So the answer is no to, we don't have that minimal, but things like Measure M and all the exciting things that we're doing in parks, incentivizes the city to keep investing.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Hannah?
Is there any chance that facilities would go back to Public Works? Because they're pretty well staffed. It seems like when you see them out there, and they got shiny toys and all that good stuff.
If there hasn't been discussions that I've been involved with, but there's always possibility of things. I know that when we were standing up Parks and Recreation, the department again, at that time, the Public Works Director, Jason Beatty, and I did have discussions about it, like, do we break this apart? Does it make sense? Part of it is also maybe my wheelhouse and my skill set, that I have a lot of facilities maintenance experience. So it made sense for it to live with me because of the experience. But at this time, we were like not having discussions, say, hey, do we break this apart again? But when we were moving over, there was that what makes the most sense. We did talk about it, because prior to the 2009, was it the 2009, Drew, when Parks and Recreation was dissolved, right at that time? I think it was separate at the time, right? There was parks maintenance and then there was facilities
So
maintenance.
before the recession, it was
Right.
a separate thing, and then we consolidated,
Right.
and then,
Correct.
because Public Works is obviously, I'm assuming, funded much heavier than Parks and Rec is.
Well, their
Just
general
in
fund is
staff?
less than us, but they have revenue bearing streams, right? So they have enterprise funds and different areas have much, maybe larger budgets than we do. But as far as general funding, Parks and Recreation does have a bigger piece of the pie
Okay.
when you look at it. But they just have more revenue bearing streams. I'm a cost center, right? So when you ask parks or facilities, we spend money. We don't generally make money because we support, we're a service. So, it's recreation side may be able to rent out the facility, so they have some revenue bearing, but for us on the maintenance side, we're not, we don't generate any revenue. But if you guys have any ideas, we're more than welcome to take
Yeah,
them.
parks rental fee not going into the general fund and going back to Parks and Rec would be something. I mean, McNear Park has to be making a decent amount of money a year. I don't know if we've ever gotten those numbers, but in field rentals, and then, I mean, there's 3 parties there Saturday and Sunday every weekend when the sun's out. That's being rented. That's being used, and Parks and Rec's not getting that money back to support that park. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I think that's it's an important point to make is, there are a number of parks, 47, right? And there's really only a few of those parks that have the types of community amenities to rent out for birthday parties or special events, et cetera. And so those are part of those fees, assessments that go back into the general fund. And there are divisions that, will have a higher cost recovery, like recreation, where we're the ones administering the permits, collecting all the fees, producing that revenue, and the city sees that as this is revenue that comes up to this, and then you've got all these expenditure lines across those accounts, like maintenance that don't receive any, and so that's part of the budget process. Is you've got your revenues across the board. How do you make sure you can maintain equity across services, knowing that a McNear Park or a Leghorns Park. If we went to a pay-to-play model, those revenues would be very high. Those parks that don't have those amenities to rent out would be much lower. So that's important to remember. And with the natural grass ball fields, who's primarily using those fields are not outside groups or those that would qualify to pay rental hourly rates. These are our homegrown teams that are always struggling to have enough playable fields. And so, part of our mission is to provide those fields at a subsidized rate, a per head fee, and we can absolutely do some of those, and we welcome the opportunity to provide more data around who's using the fields and how do we recover those costs. But until you kind of increase that level of adding lights and bringing in kind of more all-season fields, you're not increasing the amount of kind of billable hours on those fields because our needs in Petaluma are great as far as how many kids need to be playing on fields.
I could be wrong, but I believe it was like $2,500 a team for the fall, and I think there were 5 teams using McNear baseball field this fall. I mean, it's not a, it could help with the issues that are at that park. Like we have the turf reinvestment fund, right? Which I've heard that like maybe people that have been using the turf, an organization hasn't paid since this, so it's like we're making money at certain parks that maybe could go back into those parks, like the turf reinvestment fund goes back into, redoing the turf every 10 years. Just
Yeah, that's good.
whether it's painting benches or
good
gophers
feedback.
or,
Yeah,
all that good stuff. That's all.
thank you.
Does anyone else have any?
Can I ask a
clarifying?
follow-up question?
Sure.
If, do we know roughly like what is the amount of money going to the general fund from park facilities rental? Do we have a ballpark idea of how much money we're talking about total?
Yeah, I think 2022 is probably our going to be our best baseline year. It got a little skewed from 19 and 20, so we're happy to report back on that. I don't have a number to give you right now, but there are different. So we've got parks rentals, we've got facility rentals, and then we've got our services for our programs, et cetera. So happy to provide you. We can do that fairly easily at our next meeting.
I understand what you're saying about, certain parks will generate revenue, other parks may not. And the issue of wanting to provide equitable services to all parks. However, it seems like some kind of arrangement could be made where at least a portion of that money that, first of all, any money that's generated by parks should just go back directly to the Parks Department. I don't know what we need to do to make that happen. Second of all, there can be a way to distribute those funds equitably so that the park that's generating the money gets a certain percentage of that and the rest of it goes to help out other parks that need services. But I'm just wondering, is there a way to make that happen? Is there something that we can do to approach city council or some way to make it so that the revenues that are generated by the Parks Department stay with the Parks Department, as long as that's not going to be something that's like held against the department in the budget cycle, like, oh, well, you guys are keeping all this revenue now, so we're going to cut your budget by the same amount. I mean, that would be counterproductive. I'm just looking at ways
Yeah.
that to incentivize our parks to be able to become, more to be able to help themselves in essence.
Sure. I think that's a fair point, and I want to be careful. The input we take a majority of input here, and this will follow us through to recommendations to council. To have fees stay within parks, portions of each park to subsidize improvements. I think it's a slippery slope if you look at other departments or divisions kind of taking on that same approach. It would make competition or whatnot. It was just a slippery slope the way I see it administered. But advocating for improvements or investments across the parks, I think that's what we're seeing in this budget. I hope that you all are seeing that as well. In my 10 years, I've never seen support for this many different areas to improve just our operations and maintenance. And I think a lot of that's due to what we're hearing, and when we engage in the community, what you all have been advocating for over the course of the year. So I don't want to lose sight of that. It's never going to be enough, and I think every department will tell you that. But being creative and finding new revenue streams are always going to be what gets us a higher level of service.
And I do want to say that I think you guys have done an amazing job as far as making the case for these new programs that you're bringing on board and providing the justifications that were necessary to get support for that. So good job.
Thank you.
Other clarifying questions? Councilperson Now?
Yeah, on slide 13, the pie, there's capital improvements is a major part of it. And then a little tiny slice, maybe a quarter, is increased parks maintenance, and then there's a green slice with no label. What's that green slice?
Yeah, the label is off to, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
The label is off to the side. If you can't see it, it's enhanced services,
Oh, is that where that goes?
park repairs and supplies. So it generally
okay.
it's,
So there should be a line drawn to that. Okay.
yeah.
The other thing, thanks for clarifying that. The other thing is, where is the museum? I know we have to retrofit, thinking ahead for earthquake, correct? And does it also need sprinklers?
Yeah, so if the museum lives in a
So
couple,
where would that be?
yeah, the museum lives in a couple areas. Museum is a cost center under, oh, thank you. It's like intuitive screens here.
Oh, there it is. The
rec-
11.
Yes.
I mean
That,
63,000. That little gold.
yeah, that represents the operating of the museum, and Rachel can go into that in more particular, but
Because I saw, this weekend some big, and I was there last weekend with the Better Next Day and then the antique fair. There were city employees working, but I couldn't tell were they park maintenance or were they public works? Because they were right on the stairs. So they
Yeah.
were working on it. They had it taped off, caution taped.
They were doing cement work.
Cement work. So is that public works or is that parks? It's contracted. Okay. They're A-frame little things to the city, so I couldn't tell what they were doing, and I didn't want to get in their way.
And there is a capital improvement project. Again, it's not in this presentation. It was allocated, I think, in last year's, but there's money for a seismic retrofit, but it's not the entire money, but there's placeholders in there. So the museum
Okay,
will
but
also.
it's not part of that little goldenrod color.
No,
Okay.
none of this slide is capital improvement project funds, but that money will sit there in that project for a seismic retrofit. So it'll show up in the budget book under that project as well. That would be part of the capital improvement project recommendations. Yep.
Any other clarifying questions? Oh, Commissioner Rizzo?
Yeah, and I would also like to echo that all these projects are super exciting, and it's awesome to see all this money coming in for, sports fields, gophers, natural grass. So just one question on the community sports field. I think the original plan was like the soccer, lacrosse fields, and was it originally drawn up like that? And it was a staged approach, right? So I'm just wondering why we didn't put the bathrooms and concession stand in the middle instead of putting it most sports fields, whether you do it in that middle spot, where soccer's here and baseball's here, and then you don't have to fund for it again. It's in a really weird, and I think it's only been opened once, that concession stand for Soccer Fest, which is crazy.
Yeah, the master plan. Good questions. The master plan for the entire site, the Petaluma Community Sports Fields or East Washington Park site as it lives in the master plan was 3 phases. The first phase was the 3 all-weather synthetic soccer lacrosse fields, lights, and that restroom concession in that portion of the field. The restroom concession was kind of pulled out of that project, and then 2 years after the implementation, that gets installed. And then the baseball portion, currently under construction, also has a hardscape pavilion that calls for a restroom concession area there. So the idea was to, split that burden, knowing it's a 24, 25 acre site, and use that kind of footprint to then give you more square footage for phase 3, which will be softball and baseball, as well as the remaining parking, landscapes, lighting, all of that. But phase 2 is the one that's underway, but that restroom concession is not funded
Yeah.
as part of that
That's
project
what I'm
yet.
saying. Like if it feels like Wiseman, where like the bathroom's as far away from the playground
Right.
as possible. When it's
Right.
like those are the kids who need it.
Yeah,
But so it's
I hear you.
okay. Thank you.
Can you get your microphone share? Just, yep.
Oh,
There you go.
sorry about that.
No,
I think
thank
maybe
you.
it was on and then I turned it off. Okay, so I had a few questions. One thing I think it's kind of hitting off of Commissioner Berticelli is, and this is me not knowing how the budgets are done and stuff, but as you pointed out, as the park acreage is growing, the funding doesn't grow. And so when you submit budgets, is there a way to say, this is the budget that, we seem to have, this is what we're asking for this year. However, to say fully fund, and this may be, and these numbers don't mean anything, but like, this is doing it at 60%. Is there a way, and I don't know if this is not professional or what have you, but to say, this is really 60%. In order to do 80%, we would need this much money. In order to do 100%, we would do this much money. So that it really shows city council the amount of money needed. Because I think that was the one thing that I learned the most sitting on this commission is like, holy cow, not only are you guys rebuilding a full department, but of course then we had the pandemic and the supply chain and all of these things. Is that anything that could be filtered into that budget?
Yeah, I think that's, input that we want to hear is, how can we better tell our story?
Yeah.
And I think we talked fairly recently about, starting there with just kind of benchmarking parks maintenance staff. And, that work's kind of underway. We're trying to get that portion of the story nailed down. I think a lot from feedback from this commission is, okay, where does Petaluma stand up for acreage? Just that acreage, full-time maintenance. Here's our 5 comparable jurisdictions. How do we stack up there? And then we have to kind of peel back a little bit and talk about, well, not all acreage is created equal, right? What are some of the challenges that we uniquely kind of face in Petaluma? We're an older city. We have aging infrastructure. So that's another kind of layer. And we really haven't been given the space, or grace to have, those types of stories yet, because we as a city have been on the defense, until relatively recent. So that's exciting, is you're starting to see that really shift and change, and you guys are all been a part of that, and we're seeing it at the council level, we're seeing it from the community that shows up. So now it's stretching those muscles and finding out, okay, well, we've got really good stories to tell here, and we love and really appreciate all of these projects, but we got to take care of ourselves. And as we go after land acquisitions, what does that mean? What's that gap we're trying to fill so that we can be clear with the community? Hey, we're at this level. And so that's part of the story that we need to tell during the budget process, but probably check in more regular just to fine tune that message so the community is hearing it too.
Okay. In the budget, when it was $410,000 for the trees, the grazing, the gophers and stuff, and then you're paying for $211,000 from Measure M. Is that correct? That's just so part of that is just coming from Measure M. I just want to make sure that was how I read that correctly.
Could you remind me which slide?
It was on 2 different slides. That's why I wrote it down, because the 2 different slides kind of contradicted each other.
Oh, okay. Right. So the slide number 11 is the Parks and Recreation operational investment recommendations. These are recommendations that are increased on our operations. They are not Measure M intended revenues. So these are budget requests that have been supported outside of Measure M. And then
So then it's 622,000?
Are you totaling?
I should, you know what, I didn't think to write down the slides as I was watching them. Okay, so so I added up the increases. So 70,000 from tree care, 120,000 from grazing. So the slide number, what is this? I don't see the slide number, 11. Okay, so if you add all of that up, that's $410,000. And then on a different slide, you say from Measure M, that is slide 13, increased park maintenance is 211,000. So there's a difference there of 200,000, and I was just wondering, is that you're paying for 211,000 of the 410,000? Am I understanding that right?
No, thank you for the clarification. It's in addition. So
So it's really 622,000.
correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Yeah.
Because that's a large chunk of money.
It is. It is.
Okay. I was really happy to see that you guys are going for more staff. Have there been any recent surveys and I'm wondering about maybe after this year, another survey out about Measure M funding? Or is it just one survey and we base everything off of one survey?
Or
that survey time period?
Yeah. So we'll call it the first full year of implementation. So 2019 to 2020, that was a full year of community workshops, surveys, public meetings, et cetera. That really allowed us to establish those prioritized categories. And now we're at a point, 19, where are we, 2023? Yeah, approaching the halfway point. I think
Right.
that would be a great time to check back into the community and say, okay, we're reaching that halfway point. That's why we're so blessed to have a robust communications division with the city, and that it's a good story to tell now that you can, hey, these are the projects, this is what we heard, these are the momentum we've had on things
Right.
like the skate park and things like that. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
And that I will just say too, as a Sonoma County measure, it's important to be in close coordination with the other 9 cities and the regional parks, who are also kind of checking with their communities, and
Right.
and we as a county need to stay coordinated about what everybody's doing so that we can celebrate each other's successes too.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I'd asked is, there's so many things, especially it seems like after this year, for this coming calendar year, where you can go back and say, this is the bullets of everything that we've done. Like check in, where are people? Because I do think that some of the things some of the priorities could shift. Okay, the 650,000 for the skate park, that's for phase 1? Or is that the whole entire skate park?
Yeah, that's in addition to the funds that have been appropriated now. And so
And I guess we don't really have that number for phase 1, do we?
we don't have that number for phase 1. The councils, when we took the update to the council really unanimously supported city manager's recommendation that we look at that target of 10 to 13,000 square feet for phase 1. And that's the number that we felt could get us to that point. And so again, it's a 650 plus don't quote me on this, but 380 or so thousand, get us to that point where the design team now is going to come back with a design around 10 to 13,000 square foot phase 1, with one additional phase of about 10,000 to say, okay, that's a future phase funded, produced when funding becomes available.
And so when they design that, again, just to clarify, they're trying to design that within $650,000, or they're just designing and we're going to see if it's enough money?
Yeah, so they'll be designing with the complete budget. So 650 on top of the I'm not sure exactly what it is, but 380. But we know the design is right now the award was about 90,000. So you minus that, and then a lot of that will be kind of the permitting, construction management costs, et cetera. So that's the pool of money, and that's the target, is to deliver a construction-ready bid at about 10 to 13,000 with the money that we hope to get support for council on the 8th.
Great. Swim center questions. That resurfacing doesn't include any facility work, right? Okay. That facility is, well, everybody knows that it's old, and so that's not really the thing that I'm going to mention. It's not compliant with Safe Sport. And so Safe Sport is throughout, it's really everything. I don't mean to explain you if you already know this, so bear with me, but for kids and teenagers, Safe Sport is making sure that if the athletes are changing, that a person can't just walk through and see them. And so that's across everything. It doesn't matter, gymnastics, baseball, whatever. Baseball, you get to roll in usually in your uniform, but that's not the case with swimming. And so it wouldn't even help to open up the front doors to the swim center, because you still have to walk past an open locker room where athletes are changing. And so it's a pretty, we have a lot of swimmers, and that is a thing that stops the swim center from hosting more swim meets. That's a revenue thing for the city, right? It brings in, hundreds of people. But from a safety standpoint, and there's no real way to cordon it off. Like there isn't, I've thought about it 8 ways a Sunday because they asked me to. And so at some point, yes, it's aging, but it's also just doesn't reflect the sporting needs. So I guess that's a comment. Question though, the aquatics budget, that doesn't include PG&E, right? Because you showed the different slide with PG&E. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I have a lot of questions, I realize, but this was like my most exciting presentation to listen to. I asked that. Oh, I guess the last thing, can I make a comment? Is that okay? You had, Commissioner Berticelli, you had asked how does the city council know? And I think that as commissioners, I think that we can all show up to the meeting or write a letter or have a coffee. And I think that as commissioners, we can let the city council know, because we're here every month and we know more. And so I think that that's something that I plan to do, is just maybe go in and just let them know kind of some of the things that we see here. And that might be something that they don't know, right? Because you're here every month. And so I'm sure you're going to know a lot more. And then next year, if you're on the art committee, you're going to know a ton about art. So just, that's my comment. Okay. Anything else on this? Oh,
I did have a
Commissioner
comment.
Greenspan? Oh, sorry.
Just a
I thought
comment.
that you had. That's why I'd gone. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Just not a question. I just wanted to comment that I was really excited to see the significant increase in funds to care for and preserve trees, and for the new program, the new grazing programming, I think is really great. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a public comment
Oh, we
agenda
do?
too, just to get
Okay.
to, just so you're aware.
It looks like Councilperson Now.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I'm also in the airport, and they have like an ad hoc committee of 2 members, and the 2 members met with myself as the liaison, but also with the incoming city council members. And they present their whole big book on, this is what the airport does, and this is what the facilities looks like, and this is our needs, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. And that's just something I can throw out there as one of the other commissions does. So I don't know if Parks would think about doing an ad hoc where you do, they just meet for coffee, like once a month with a city council member.
Wow. Was that part of the council orientation?
No, this is something they do as an ad hoc. It's the commissioners. 2 of the commissioners, they're like the marketing people for the airport, and they presented to me as the new liaison kind of a cliff notes of what the airport does and facilities and budget and everything, and what they're trying to accomplish and what they would like to see happen. And now they've just met with the other two new council members to get them up to speed. So when it does come to council and budget, they are very aware and educated on what the airport provides and what their needs are.
Yeah,
So
I'm
it's just a,
happy to, I wasn't aware of that. I'm
yeah, it's
happy
just
to
called an ad hoc.
look at that model, yeah.
It's just two members that they
One's ad,
meet for
one's hoc.
coffee. The Pete's.
Just joking.
Thank you. Okay, and so we have a public comment on this. I don't have a card.
Is it the letter?
No, pardon?
D-
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. I missed that there was a comment in here. I don't see,
Is it not attached?
I don't see it on mine. I just have an operations overview. I don't have a public comment for
Yep.
this.
Just
That
a
I'm looking
clerical point on the agenda where we'll just open up public comment if anyone is here. It doesn't look like anyone's coming through the doors, but I don't believe we had another posted on the agenda. Okay, so we don't have any public comments on this item posted to the agenda, Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Isn't this? It's an email. all of us.
But that's in reference to Kenilworth, which is the next item number.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the only one that I saw, yes. I, for some reason, I misunderstood you, Drew. I thought that you had said that we had a public comment, so sorry about that.
My apologies.
Okay, so that wraps up item number 2. We are moving on to item number 3, the Kenilworth Park Revitalization Project update, the summary of community engagement findings, and to receive input on the scope of design. Drew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've got some special guests here tonight. I'm going to ask a couple of them to come up to the staff table. Yep, just stretch our legs. And while they're getting settled in, this, again, is an exciting project we have been working through to get to a point where it's important to provide the commission with an update on where we are, where the community engagement has led us, and offer you all an opportunity to provide some input as we launch forward into design. So as we move the slides up, I'm just going to introduce the team now. We've got Erica Jacobs here. She's our project manager with the Capital Improvement Projects team under Public Works and Utilities. We've got Jessica Medina, who's been critical in our communications and outreach through this project. We also have Mary White over there, who's our engineering tech for this project, and then David Ward, public art specialists. And so we're going to walk through this. I'll start and kick things off, but then have Erica kind of take you through some of the project specifics. But really, the bulk of this is going to be presenting back on what we've heard, what we've learned through the community outreach effort, and we'll get started. So, next slide, please. So the Kenilworth Park, as you know, is about a 0.4 acre park in the central of our city. It is, the project kind of came to be, well, I guess I'll go through the overview first, stick to the slides. The project came to be through support from this commission and the community to essentially consolidate the city's share of a Prop 68 fund, which we applied for as a non-competitive grant, but we was qualified for through our regional sales tax, the Measure M. So we qualified it through there. We also, with the location of this park, qualified for an exemption to the matching portion of it. So all of the kind of stars aligned and consolidated that funds to this site for this project, which is not just a park component, but to look holistically at a redesign of Kenilworth Park. We are going to go through kind of what that engagement, that community engagement has been up to this point. Eric is going to talk about our roadmap through design, our construction strategy, and give you an update on where our timeline is, and ask for your feedback and input on all of the above. Next slide, please. Our overarching goal is to create a safe, inclusive, and innovative public park that serves the growing needs of the community. When we define community here, the unique nature of where this park is situated and the lack of similar park amenities within that Midtown area really has created a good energy and exciting kind of basis for why we want to take a big look at this park. Next slide, please. So this is an active community park in the same designation as a general plan defines McNear, Lucchese, Wiseman, Leghorns. It does have a rich history. It was originally established in 1882 as a 65-acre tract, which was turned into a horse breeding ranch in 1902. The city was transferred ownership to the city in 1911 and turned into a municipal park then. It hosted baseball games, horse racing, rodeos, public campgrounds, and really has a claim to fame with some historical records of Don McLaren, who is an architect, or landscape architect, very famous for his work with Frederick Law Olmsted in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, but had several articles talking about the potential and lure of this space, which was Kenilworth Park. So a lot of neat history behind this. The name Kenilworth is reference to a winning prize racehorses, one of the fastest in the state at the time, and there was a contest around naming, and the youth unanimously voted for Kenilworth, which is the name ever since. So we vote for winners. When we look at this park, there's not, again, kind of an element of it that's not worth reimagining. The turf is gopher prone. It's in bad shape. The playground surfacing and equipment is lacking. We've lost a lot of our historic trees and are scheduled to lose the remaining due to some beetle. And for all of those reasons, we see a lot of opportunity again and good timing to look at this park holistically. So the funding sources up to this date is the Proposition 68, which is about $218,000, and about $100,000 that remains in this project for Sonoma County Measure M. There's also a commitment from the Public Art Committee for about $100,000 to this point to dedicate into a play space, which David can talk about in a minute, but that's kind of the pool of funds that lives in this project currently. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Jessica Medina. She's going to talk us through kind of what the community engagement timeline has been, kind of go through what we've learned. And thank you, Jessica, for being here, and take it away.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm Jessica. Drew brought me in to help with communications and community engagement on the project. So we see community input as a really essential part of this project, and we want to be sure we have a clear understanding of what the community wants, what their vision is, what their needs are into the future. So I'm going to take you through our community engagement timeline, and then I'll talk a little bit about the community engagement we've done to date and what we've learned from that. So back in October, we did our project kickoff, and we started with a community workshop, which was held at the Kenilworth Teen Center, and we also did an online survey, which we promoted in various places, and I'll get into that in a minute. Fast forward to tonight, where we're here talking to you fine folks, giving you an update and looking for some input. Around this time, spring or summer of this year, we'll select our design firm and then kick off our community outreach and design process. A little bit further down the road, but in the same time frame, we'll share the design with the community and seek stakeholder input, do additional surveys and or community meetings to gather more feedback on the proposed design. In the fall or winter of 2023, we'll present an updated design and seek community feedback and also make funding recommendations. And then in spring 23-24, we'll bring the design and phase 1 of construction to City Council for approval. Next slide, please. All right, so some of the community engagement we've done to date. As I mentioned before, we did the community wide online survey, and we also did a community workshop. We promoted these using various methods, including our community update email, our city social media channels. We did dedicated postcards. We identified and contacted key stakeholders, like the library, for instance, or different groups around town, and provided them with a stakeholder toolkit, which included messaging, social media posts, if they wanted to send a dedicated email, draft messaging for that, and got the word out that way. And all our outreach was done in Spanish and English. So, to the online survey. The online survey went from September through November. We got about 200 responses. It was put out in Spanish and English. The vast majority of our responses were in English. I think we had one Spanish response. And again, we shared it through those channels, which I mentioned before. And some of the things we learned from the online survey, we have the graphs here. I'll do a high level, just touch on each of these things, but the full report is available for both the online survey results and the community workshop. It can be found at cityofpetaluma.org/Kenilworth Park. So one of the questions we asked on the survey was, how often do your family visit Kenilworth Park? And we got a whopping 29%, almost never, and followed, by weekly 17%, monthly 18%. So we learned that a lot of people are not visiting the park very often, if at all. We also learned, we asked, why do you most often visit Kenilworth Park? And 55% said to enjoy the playground. So that was interesting. The playground's a big draw for Kenilworth Park. We asked, what are the barriers that prevent you from enjoying Kenilworth Park currently? And 57% responded the park amenities, followed by 44% citing the poor lawn conditions. So good feedback we received there. And we also asked, what new features would you like to see included in the park? 76% responded natural elements. So that's very good feedback for us to have, down to 36% picnic area and barbecue pits, 32% sport courts, active recreation. So all valuable feedback here. And some key findings from our online survey. We found that walking or driving are the main modes of transportation to the park. The playground is currently the main attraction. A lack of park amenities is the main barrier to enjoying the park. There's a strong desire to see natural features integrated into the new park design, and that trees and shade are valued and prioritized by the survey respondents. Okay, on to the community workshop. So as I mentioned, we held the community workshop at the Kenilworth Teen Center. It was back on October 20th of 2022. We had about 25 attendees. Spanish interpretation was available. Nobody took us up on it, but it was there. And we shared and promoted the workshop through the same channels that we did the online survey. The goal of the workshop, we really aimed to gain a better understanding of which experiences our community members feel would best create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive space that serves the community's needs. So that was our aim in putting on the workshop and what we wanted to learn. Thank you. So at the workshop, we had 4 rounds of small group conversations, during which the groups were asked to answer various questions, and then they summarized their ideas and put them on Post-it notes that were then put on the wall and categorized. And so those small group exercises were followed by a large group facilitated discussion. And the insights that we got from those conversations and the Post-its were then organized into the following key themes, which are listed here. So the themes are ideas for park characteristics, classes, equipment and features, events and activities, and landscaping. And so I'm going to take you through some graphs that represent the ideas that we received within each of those themes. Sorry, this is a little confusing to explain, but anyway, and you may see the same ideas under multiple themes because we put them where they would best fit, and so some of them fit in 2 places. So the first theme is the ideas for park characteristics. 23% of people said they would like a safe and comfortable park, followed by 22% who said that they're looking for something that can accommodate all ages and abilities and will be family and pet friendly. The second key theme, ideas for park classes. Age-based art and education classes were all tied at 21%, so we learned that's important to everybody. Ideas for park equipment and features. Play areas, amenities for sports, and gathering and art were the top 4 categories under this key theme. And ideas for parks, events, and activities. Active recreation, 34% of attendees would like the park to remain a space for active play and feel it should offer events and activities that get visitors up and moving. So wanting to be active in the space. Oops. And next, ideas for park landscaping. We found that attendees would like the park landscaping to be functional and diverse. So 20% felt gardens were important. 18% were looking for natural, native, drought-tolerant plantings, and on and on. And as I said, if you want to look at these more closely, you have the PowerPoint there, or you can go to our project website and there's a full report available there. Next slide, please. So now I'll hand it over to Erica.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, if we have a little bit of an interim piece here where David Ward is going to come up and talk to us about the public art outreach that they did in his team in preparation to bring on a public artist into our team overall. So with that, I'll turn this slide to David.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, and so between January and March of this year, the Public Art Program launched a community survey that was also online, offered in English and Spanish. The questions that they were hopefully trying to gather more feedback from and did was focused primarily on the role of art and play opportunities and youth, family, teen, adult experiences at Kenilworth Park. So 6 questions were offered, both in English and Spanish. We received 173 responses through the survey and did a few in-person opportunities as well, partnered with the library, the farmers market as well, to try and get some in-person engagement as well. So I'll explain a little bit more later about the role of public art and what the opportunity is ahead and the commitments that are going to be made from the Public Art Fund and from the committee. But essentially, these were in an effort to generate the goals of a separate but integrated project that is going to be part of the Kenilworth Playground public art piece. So more to come on that, and I'll hand it back over to Erica and join you again in a minute.
Thank you, David. Good evening, commissioners. Happy to be here tonight. Again, my name is Erica Jacobs, and I'm the project manager, and I work in the Public Works and Utilities Department. And we're very clearly working closely with Drew and Parks Department on this exciting project. So with the next slide, this slide, and I apologize if the image is a little bit faint to see, but it's really an aerial image of the park layout, what will be hopefully the beginnings of our site planning. The outline is the footprint that we're going to have to work within. It's situated next to the library, of course, and the teen center between East Washington Street, Payran, and I always forget the little side street there that goes back behind towards the fairgrounds. But at any rate, the things that are going to be important for us to consider to inform the park design are really large-scale key elements, such as the existing site characteristics and challenges. And just pausing on that for a moment, it's been discussed, and we can all see there's quite a bit of aging park amenities that need attention, the playground itself, and other recreational programming within the park. There's an old sand volleyball area that isn't utilized now by, I think, anybody that we've seen. But whether or not something like that stays as a recreational or play element in the park, those are all parts of design considerations. Is how will we reprogram or reimagine the space, as Drew was saying. Some of the other existing site characteristics and challenges have to do with its setting within the busy streets next to East Washington and Payran, safe access to the park, and also accessible pathways inside the park, to and inside the park. Those are all current challenges that we face and we hope to address during the design. Other challenges, our existing conditions are that there's very poor drainage in Kenilworth Park. The playground actually floods. Certainly, we saw quite a bit of ponding this past wet season. So we really do need to look at ways to address the drainage. And maybe that could govern some of the placement of key features as we look at the topography moving into the design and the soils and the conditions that we have to work with on the site. And as I mentioned, accessibility, ADA, is going to be a very big, important part of the design in this park. Not just to and from and accessing into the park, but throughout pathways that are programmed through the landscape architecture to kind of form the circulation elements through the park into all the amenities. Setting and location are very key as well. As I mentioned, the setting within the busy streets of East Washington Street, the library, there's quite a bit of circulation around this area. It's such a central park for Petaluma. It's the only park in Midtown Petaluma. It's the only park serving the Midtown area of Petaluma. So in that, it's a very exciting opportunity. It can be something that's can have quite a draw, especially given its location next to the library and the teen center and the other facilities around there. So then we also look at what's going to be very important is community input. Not only the community input that Jessica has already summarized that we conducted last fall through survey and our initial workshop, but a strategy to continually engage with the community at the very earliest outset after we kick off the preliminary phase of design, throughout design, and then and coming back to this commission and having an outreach strategy that seeks to engage everybody, that really is inclusive and goes beyond just, checking off one community meeting and then moving on. We really want to have a creative and engaged process as we bring the community into the possibilities envisioning for the park. And that was made clear in I will get to our consultant selection process in a moment, but that was a very important piece of communicating to potential design teams to come on, that was going to be a scope element for them to participate in. We'll also consider with the design team and the community the intended uses and programming for the park. Again, as I mentioned, where there now is an older volleyball area that may or may not be something else. People have in the community engagement so far have already expressed a lot of creative ideas and interests for things that they'd love to see in that park. So we'll continue that conversation. And importantly, the incorporation of the public art and finding out once we bring on the design team and the public artist and work with the community how best those elements will show up in the design of play elements or other features. And then very importantly, landscape architecture and the overall landscaping design for this park are going to be critical. Trees, plantings, placement of those, shade opportunities, circulation and flow pathways, and the overall sort of skeleton and structure for providing the placement and the schematic plan for everything else that can exist there. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. So as we were planning knowing that we were going to be bringing on a design team to help us support the design of the park, we started the public engagement last fall in advance with the intention to have that feedback and have that feedback play a critical role in the criteria we established to select a design team that would be perfect fit for what this community needs with this park, and also to make sure that the scope of work that we were putting out, saying that we wanted a design team to support, reflected those elements of design that we were hearing were important. So some of the criteria that we actually put in to rank and score our proposals from our consultant selection were their experience and expertise integrating public art features into cohesive park design and play spaces, design of inclusive and innovative park amenities and spaces. We really look towards creativity and an actual real-world experience with this type of design. Experience with inclusive community engagement and reflecting that in past park design. including outreach to historically underrepresented members of the community, and the use of climate-friendly and green building approaches. So, for example, when we look at the storm drainage challenges in Kenilworth, we don't necessarily think immediately that a civil engineered piped drainage system might be the only solution. We might be able to do some low impact development, bioswales, rain gardens, and other very exciting features there. That could be an extension of the existing habitat park behind the library. There could be some very exciting things that we can do that are ecologically friendly. Okay, with that, we'll go on to the next one. Key scope of work elements that we included in the request for proposals were really just the template to communicate to the design community out there. This is what we're looking for. These are the services that we'll be requesting of you. But ultimately, we're going to have room to incorporate new things that weren't in the request for proposals, potentially not completely outside of the scope, but that to truly articulate in the scope. So that's one of the reasons we're here tonight, is to make sure that we have a chance to explain to you where we're at and what's currently in that, but we haven't finalized our consultant selection yet. We're nearing that point this week. But once we have that team on board, we'll have a process to negotiate and finalize all the details of a scope. And then certainly as we move forward with that team, we have room to make sure that we're incorporating things that, considerations that we may, that we'll have your feedback from you tonight as well. So, yeah, I think maybe I can just really quickly hit on those scope elements. Sorry about that. So it's the schematic design. So we'll start by doing a preliminary site investigation, which includes topographical survey, just everything that has to do with kind of really understanding the site from an engineering standpoint. We'll do utility mapping, soils testing, et cetera. But we'll right out of the gate start up with our initial community engagement so that the design team can start, with the city staff, can start having conversations with the community before we get very far, and so that we can educate the community about what we're learning about the site and what are our constraints and opportunities. The green building is in there, coordination and integration with public art. They'll have a task for permitting and environmental services. And then later on, we'll have final design and bidding support as we get ready for construction bidding. Okay, thank you. Next slide. This is a project where we do have the great benefit of funding from Prop 68 and Measure M, as Drew was explaining, and it's roughly $150,000 to $200,000, I think, right, to get us started with a initial design phase budget. And so what we'll be able to do with that is, bringing on this consultant, we'll be able to negotiate a scope and deliverables that'll get us to a point where we have a schematic design, renderings of a fully articulated vision for the design of the park that later we can build upon and add to bring the design to bid-ready documents, which will be at the next phase of design. But ultimately, we'll be coming up with a strategy with our team and with the community that envisions a phased build-out of the park as well, because budget and funding, these initial designs and renderings and concepts for the park will help us articulate the needs and then leverage that initial phase of design to request additional outside funding, grants, and hopefully partnering on for construction dollars for the park. But in the meantime, as we begin that, we'll start to have an idea of how we can phase the construction elements, much like the skate park has envisioned doing. So we start with a limited set of funds, but we're able to leverage and build upon that as we go forward. So hopefully, ultimately, realizing that full build-out vision. We do plan to begin a first initial phase of construction by June 30th of 2024, because we need to encumber funds for the Prop 68 funding by then. So that could just be an initial site development, some form of initial construction phase could begin by then. Okay, next slide. And this again is, David's going to explain their art process.
Yeah, thank you. So again, Public Art Committee has been a part or trying to find a good way to be a part of this project for over a year now. And I think the original vision started to cook up about integrating, dreaming bigger of what a public art program really does is. And to give you some context about our public art program, it really has been starting to take off over the last few years, and they're envisioning more than just static artwork of murals and sculpture, and dreaming bigger of what can that mean? How can we expand those definitions? And I think this project is a really great understanding and catalyst to really launch us into that next phase of what this program, public art program, really means. And thinking about play spaces and artwork combined. Who are these play spaces for? How can we make sculpture more inviting, more durable, play safe? So that's where this conversation really started to brew. And so that leads us to actually next Thursday at our regular Public Art Committee meeting, we're going to be looking at a 90% complete RFQ, request for qualifications draft, to get in contract with an artist that will be hired for creative services, but also to help design the proposal for public art play space that will be a part of this project. And so I use the word separate project, integrated project, but I don't actually think that's accurate. I think it's a separate effort, but it is an integrated project. It's going to have funding from Public Art to cover this contract, and then also additional contributed funds down the road to help build, install, fabricate the play structure as well that will be hopefully approved. So the RFQ will hopefully be approved at its 90% level. We just have to plug in project goals, and we'll launch May 1st, and that'll run for about a month and a half. And by June, we're hoping to have the selected artist. And when I use the term artist, that's because we're using designer. We're using a lot of terms here, and so artist can mean an architectural firm, landscape designer, it could be a general designer, creative team even. We're happy to take any and all that are qualified and meet those kind of selection criteria that we've outlined. And this person, these creative services that we're talking about, they're going to represent public art goals and values, the Public Art Committee and program, and really be a part of an arm of this team that is going to design and propose the whole entire site plan. So they'll be representing the interest of public art and integrating those really fabulous public art goals that research has shown across the world of what public art can really bring to sites. So really exciting. And again, as Drew mentioned earlier in this item, that Public Art Committee is prepared to make a contribution as well for the installation and fabrication. It's somewhere in the realm of $100,000 to $150,000. We're not totally certain that number is final yet. I think a lot of that comes down to the proposed design, the play features that are designed, what the grading and the site improvements kind of will take up as well. So I hope that clarifies a little bit more about public art's role in this project. I'm going to be here for the rest of the item, and I'm happy to take questions too. I do want to encourage you all to take a look at the item that will be at next Thursday's Public Art Committee meeting, because it really spells out the entire process. All the RFQ applicants are required to look at the Appendix A, which is all of the data from the collected community survey. And that's, again, where we're generating all the goals for the ideal candidate to be a part of this project. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. And this is just a general overview of the timeline for the design process. It's also with our community engagement pieces and art pieces thrown in there too. We are at that point here in April where we're finalizing our consultant selection process. We're currently down to a top 2 finalists. We've been through review of proposals and interviews, and this week our selection team, pretty much all here tonight, are going to be working to finalize that selection, and immediately thereafter we'll be able to move into negotiating the scope. We want to definitely hear your feedback tonight, any additional ideas or consideration, because this is a great timing opportunity to reflect anything that we may not have considered yet into that process. Both of the top finalist teams are just excellent, and both would be very excited to work with the city on this project. So it's been a great process. We've all felt really excited, and we look forward to introducing that team, whoever is selected, to the community. Rolling up our sleeves together. So that will begin in May. We look to kick off the project between May, June, sometime as soon as they're on board and we have an executed agreement. But we really, and I love, give credit to Jessica for this idea. I really love this too. This under that May, December, the design of this park really equals putting together community engagement, the technical design, and public art. So these are all really key components, and they're sort of separate moving parts, but they're going to be, we really envision this team all bringing those pieces together for a cohesive and successful design process. We'll be working on that initial phase of design through the rest of this year. As you know, David was saying, they're going to be bringing on the public artist or art team this summer, and that's really right in timing with when we'll be doing a general kickoff for the project and our initial early community communications and engagement planning. So the timing is all really well aligned to move us forward as a team and cohesively thinking through all the elements. It's sort of later in 2024 that we'll move into kind of the more later final design phase, funding permitting, and we'll know a lot more at the culmination of this preliminary schematic design phase with all of the visioning and renderings and excitement generated. And then it's again later, probably closer to 2025, that we can begin real construction, but with, again, that initial phase of construction encumbering Prop 68 funds by summer of 2024. So some first groundbreaking phase of construction will start next year. Next steps, and this is our final slide before we open it up for comments and questions. Just again, onboarding the park design consultant, incorporating the feedback we hear from you all this evening into our final design scope development, developing a phasing strategy. We really need to bring that design team on board and start having some good internal discussions to kind of like strategize through how that will look both for the remainder of design, how we'll plot out that schedule, and then what that will look like in terms of strategizing the construction phasing. So we'll rely on external expertise to help us think through those details. We will go ahead and execute the agreement once we are through that scoping phase, have a project kickoff meeting this summer. Public art collaboration starts this summer again, and a community engagement, of course, all the way throughout the project. That is where we're at now, and really wanted to open it up for, and I don't know if we have public comment on this. We did maybe have one. So I'll turn it back over to Drew now and to the commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica, and I'll just do the same and turn it back to you, Chair, for any questions.
Okay, do we have any clarifying questions about this agenda item? Councilperson Now.
I didn't see any bike racks, and in other communities they use public art to kind of create these really cool looking bike racks. So when they're not being used for bikes, they're pieces of art. So I didn't see anything like that. And I would say that the volleyball hasn't been used since pre-COVID, because I drive that Payran every day, sometimes 3-4 times a day, because it's on my route to get to my parents' farm, which is Payran goes into Magnolia. And there were lots of families in that volleyball area, and they were picnicking and they were playing volleyball, and there were a lot of it looked like multi-ages. So I don't know if they came from the houses next door in that residence. So did we send postcards to the neighbors? 500 feet like we would any project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
We did.
Okay. And then I noticed that there's a lot of travelers. I think they get off the freeway, they maybe pick up sandwiches or something, and I see them getting water for their dogs and letting their kids run around and stretch their legs. So I see a lot of travelers, and people do travel down Washington Street to get out to Bodega. And I see a lot of people picnicking all week long.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of out of town because Washington is that main thoroughfare to get to Bodega. So, and it's right near the freeway.
Okay, that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. The other thing is we have the unsheltered. So I think that deters a lot of families
Yeah.
from going there. There's graffiti on the Kenilworth wall and weeds growing on the roof, and there's a lot of things going on outside that Kenilworth building. So
Yes.
kind of deters a lot of families. So.
That if I can just jump in, it reminds me of a theme that came up in the workshop, which was very interesting, I think, and unique that I wasn't expecting was, a lot of people with how busy, we'll say that the vicinity, the amenities around their public, like skate parks and swim centers, libraries, schools. This park was, more often used as, people would walk around this park versus, what we see and typically expect is even just pass-throughs. But that was kind of telling is, the access alone, I think, is going to be a really interesting exercise from a design standpoint of how do we integrate those passive travel, because we have now a smart station in a corridor too. And how do you kind of connect it all together, which was interesting that the trend now is to walk around the park, which we obviously want to change.
And there's a lot of children who walk to McKinley from that neighborhood, and they walk around because they use that a crosswalk. It's safer to use that corner crosswalk. So I don't think they would walk through the park to get to McKinley. They would go down to Payran in Washington to cross, because that is a safer intersection cross at than the one down by Jack in the Box.
Great. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, great. Any other, Commissioner, I'll just go in line. Commissioner Greenspan.
Thank you. I'm just curious where, and if consideration, I'm sure it has, you guys have considered kind of where Relief would fit into these plans, and kind of if you could talk a little bit about that partnerships with Relief. I know that they had planned on site planting at Kenilworth, but is that being put on hold until after the design phase, or?
I can partially address it, and I think Cindy and Drew too a little bit. I know that Relief, we have a grant for some tree planting at Kenilworth, and Cindy and I actually tomorrow morning have a meeting to talk about coordinating that, because I think there might be a timing consideration there with just getting into design and planning the layout of the site and understanding the site, but there may be some opportunities to take advantage of that. So we're going to be having those conversations. But do you want to comment more, Cindy, on the?
Sure, absolutely. The CAL FIRE grant that we have includes planting trees in Kenilworth Park. There may be a timing issue because obviously with the grading, you want to do the grading before you plant trees so you don't have to rip trees out. Because that just doesn't make sense in order of operations. But Relief and I have been in talks. Actually, one of the very first walks we did and discussions was a walk of Kenilworth Park before Prop 68 monies had come to be. The current chair of the tree committee actually did do a layout, because he's landscape architect Howard Formby, of a planting of that park. So we do kind of have a first layout. But last week alone, Relief and I met and talked about what would we do if, we had to shift those trees to a different park. Just identifying, other funding. They're still on board and they want to help plant out that park. There are possibilities too, the tree committee discussed today, in helping fund the replacement of those Dutch elms, that the final two that are going to get removed. So I think it's going to be a collaboration, maybe of tree committee, Relief, Parks team, but it'll definitely be integrated all the way through.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi. I was at the in-person community workshop, and it seemed like a lot of people from the neighborhood really want safe access to that park. Whether it's like figuring out a way to have like a safe walking area through that parking lot that separates the skate park and the library, because a lot of people use that to cut through, and just crosswalks on Payran there. But also, I'm just wondering how the city's takeover of the fairgrounds is going to affect Kenilworth Park, and like if there's going to be maybe funding for that, or funding's going to get kind of shifted over there because now we have this huge space to take care of as well. And just how to incorporate that kind of as a cohesive area. Yeah.
Yeah, I can take
ahead,
that
Drew.
one.
Yeah.
Unless you're dying to jump in.
No, I was just gonna mention that. No,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and turn that one. Yeah.
I think on a
Fairgrounds is outside of my
yeah, I think
purview.
on a larger, I guess a similar situation with the relief trees, right? It's an issue of timing, and this project, although we're kicking off design, we're underway, on this, and where the fairgrounds ultimate guiding principles land is an interim transition of management of the property, primarily to preserve a fair. And we're looking at a master plan with community involvement that would be about 3 to 5 years. So we hope that, in three years, we would be well underway with a new park space. You can't ignore the fact that this, parcel and the histories are intertwined, and the stakeholders are as well. So we have to approach the design in a way that makes sure that we're engaging folks to not limit ourselves and our vision of what it could be, and make sure it plays well. But we also don't want to kind of hitch our wagon to another essentially master plan process that we know is going to be at its earliest 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. And then just one more thing. I don't know how many people drive through Katati, but there's that little volleyball area in the redwoods there. It's used every night. Like I don't know if it's a girls' team that's practicing there, but I remember growing up, that volleyball court was always used. So I think some sort of recreation, that's a community that's not really served unless you play high school, or I don't even know if junior high has a volleyball team, but unless you play high school sports. I know people bring their nets to McNear, but to have that beach volleyball feel could be really great.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Berticelli?
I was wondering if I see on slide number 22, the layout of the site, there's some outlines, I assume, of the project boundaries. I would really like to see more of an integration or a connecting space between the library, the teen center, and the park. It seems like, I understand, I see there's some parking there for the library, but there's also a huge parking lot right across the street. It seems like there could be like a really nice community gathering space, a plaza, some type of space in there that connects those different elements and brings them together in a more cohesive way. So that's just an observation. Maybe that's something that could
No,
be
I think
looked
that's
at.
that's the type of input that we want to hear, and if there are other commissioners that feel similar or want to weigh in during comments, we want to hear that too, to make sure we capture it.
Commissioner DeLuca?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if you were at all familiar with the park that was built on top of the tunnel, of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Tunnel tops. Because I just think they did an amazing job with that park. And when I think about Kenilworth and what you were talking about tonight, I was thinking that it's roughly what they did. They integrated all those different areas there. And then the children's park, and I thought of you because the children's park, it's artwork that the kids are using for their play equipment. Like the Andrew Goldsworthy the fallen tree and they climb through the trunk. And it's just, to me, I was just enthralled with that park. And so anyway, you're familiar with it, and that makes me happy.
Thank you for that. And I think just in conversations with the prospective design teams and the talent and resources they bring to bear, have those things in mind too, and have articulated to us some very creative approaches and an understanding of the importance of natural play spaces and creative play elements. So, and I think that the opportunity for that synergy with art is really exciting.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Commissioner Greenspan.
Thanks. I'm just wondering where the landscaped area near the library, that strip that was created by Daily Axe, the rain garden, how does that fit into, because that's not part of the property exactly, right? But how does it is it going to be incorporated in, or?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. It's not envisioned as part of anything open to this park's design, but I think what could be a potential really great opportunity, and we did hear some feedback from the community on this, is ways to sort of expand upon that or relate to it or connect from it, and an expansion of the theme of pathways or something like that, or seeing elsewhere in the park garden space. We heard a lot of that kind of feedback. So I think it most likely will be recognized and reflected and integrated in some way, although not modified or, yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to quickly jump on that as well, Erica, and I'm glad it's delineated there. The setback from the library is an agreement with Daily Axe and the library folks for maintenance, so that's a real important part of it. But Daily Axe, we're touring several sites with some recent grant opportunities that they've had, and we'd be excited to work on this project too. So as we kick off design or outreach for that, we want to be sure that they're at the table, because we want their eye, we want their partnership, and they've got a couple of great big roofs to work from if they want rain catchment, and we've got drainage issues. So we're thinking along those lines too, that they have expertise that can help with and resources. So good point. We hope to expand on it.
Great. I was really hoping to hear that they had a seat at the table. They were interested in the project and wanted to expand further on their, because it's such a great amenity at the library, and I think, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, Commissioner Rizzo?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any way to work those drainage areas, problems into play areas.
It's an interesting idea.
Whether you're creating a rock area that the water gets into, and you can watch how water flows, and whether it's the kids museum up in Santa Rosa. So some way to okay, well, it's a problem, but how can we make it an asset where people are still wanting to come to the park during the winter because it has this feature.
Something like a bioswale that's dry during the summer with rock and kind of riverway type feel. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other clarifying comments? No? Okay, so I'll add mine. I don't think I have any question. I guess I do have questions. I am wondering, when I was reading through the comments, there were a lot of comments about the teen center. I'm wondering if, can the fence come down that surrounds the teen center and then make that a basketball court with 2 hoops? Like that, could that be implemented? Is there a reason why that fence is there?
Yeah, I mean, I was not with the city when the teen center coordinator was operating out of the teen center. I think Commissioner Rizzo's commented before about her experiences with that. But what I'll say is right now, currently the teen center is being primarily used for programming during the week. That doesn't necessarily need fencing. There's programming in other areas, parts, but some level of security. But it is rented fairly frequently on weekends for private events, et cetera. And I know that they typically renters can spill out into that area. So that's not limiting the fence in its current footprint. The conditions of the concrete, the hoops, all of those things are in pretty disrepair. And I think the feedback we're looking for tonight too is this project started with the footprint of the park, which excluded the teen center. But what I've heard and what we heard during the workshop is, let's not ignore kind of those fences and those shared sources and see if there's opportunity there to make more of a cohesive play area, knowing that we are kind of constrained on this site as far as square footage goes.
Yeah, because I know that the basketball courts, at Lucchese and other, they're very, very busy, and you have almost a court there. Volleyball, so there hasn't been a net at Kenilworth. I can't remember when the net was taken down for safety reasons. So, no volleyball can happen there. But I know volleyball is really, really popular right now. Everybody wants to play volleyball. It's something that I've fielded questions from community members about. In particular, ages 4th grade through 8th grade, because there isn't, unless you go to Kenilworth or Petaluma Junior, you don't have access to volleyball. And then if you want to play volleyball in high school, you can't make the team because you have no experience. And so it's this chicken and egg thing. And I know Girls United, they had a volleyball camp that sold out, like all of their volleyball camps have sold out. So there's this great want for volleyball. And it was a bummer kind of seeing that I don't know, I would have thought that there was going to be more input, but I also know, I pay attention to this, and I missed the art committee survey. I didn't even know it existed. So I understand how we all miss these things. But I do know that volleyball, I'd really like to see that maintained. It's something that's talked about a lot. And as I don't think there's another volleyball court in town. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is it, right? So
not a dedicated court.
Yeah. So, and again, the Cotati one, that's a whole team. That's a club team that plays there. Yeah. That could be a revenue source too, right? So when we look at that, I'm all about Commissioner Berticelli's idea of probably won't happen, but a pie in the sky, right? Taking that parking and being able to connect the two, taking into consideration that there is not a current, at least the last time I was there, a clear walkway from the library into that park. And then the walkway from that garden, right, is kind of like a walkway to nowhere. And I'm sure you take that into consideration, but those are just kind of comments when we're looking at it in terms of if there's going to be grass, nothing degrades grass more than people walking the same path over and over. But this is super exciting. I mean, I'm so stoked about the public art. I was on the art committee when that was all starting to brew, and it's nice to see it come to fruition. Super exciting. Thank you. All right, and do we have any public comment for this? No, correct? We had, we did. We had the written comment from Taryn. And do I need to read that, or it was emailed to all of us?
Correct. So we'll acknowledge that there's a written
Acknowledge.
comment posted on the agenda for the item. Thank you.
All right, so I believe that wraps up item number 3. So we will go to committee comment, and I will go through, maybe starting down with Commissioner Greenspan for any comments and parks updates.
No parks updates. My family has been sick for what seems like months, so I haven't gotten out to the parks, but I just, before staff leaves, thank you so much for all of your work on this. I'm just so impressed with the whole community outreach and this whole process. So thank you very much. And all the integration between all the different departments and committees and everything. So thank you. I just wanted to recognize you before you leave. Yeah. My only update from Youth Commission is updates. There are no updates. No, we're still trying to figure out restructuring or what the youth commission is going to look like next year. So, or even near future. So really, there's no update there. But yeah, that's my comments.
Before Commissioner Rizzo, you start, I forgot something. I didn't look at my notes with Kenilworth, and since you all are still here, is there any way, one thing that was commented was that there's a lack of response from the 18 and under crowd. And I'm wondering if maybe, in particular teenagers, right? And so I'm wondering if there could be an outreach to Matthew Harris, who's the superintendent, and then go from there saying, you know, everyone has a homeroom, whether you're in middle school or high school. And so, if that survey, again, if it takes 5 minutes, you know, if it comes from Harris and say, in this homeroom, or make it an assignment that has to be turned in, that is the golden way to get them to do it. And I think that would be and I think just in the future, I know Matthew Harris would be down for that, and that would immediately get you 100% participation. It might get you a little bit too much information, but it might be the way to go in trying to get these teenagers, especially since the youth commission is kind of fizzling out. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, Jessica, would you mind coming up to the podium just so it's recorded?
I love that idea. Thank you. I think that sounds good. And our comms team is also beginning to work more closely with Petaluma City Schools comms team. So maybe for the younger ages, we can do some outreach there too. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Rizzo.
Yeah, especially at McKinley, right? Let's see. Parks look good. I missed my last art meeting because I was on vacation, but I'm excited to talk about Kenilworth again on Thursday. One suggestion I had from community was if Parks and Rec could have like a Google Calendar. That is obviously you can't edit, but just so people know what's happening, like if this field's rented out from these times, like maybe there's a game going on that I could go see, but I don't know about it because there's no information of who's on what fields at what times. So just, you know, Google Calendar that no one can access but can see what's happening. And then just getting the attachments to the agenda like a week before our meeting would be super awesome. I had access and then I lost access, and then by the time I regained access, I was coaching baseball, so I couldn't really access it. So just so I can feel more prepared coming into these meetings. But other than that, parks look great. Thank you.
Commissioner Berticelli.
Yes, I have to once again commend Cindy and her staff for their all their hard work. And I saw some of your guys out working the other day. Things are, of course, this time of year is always nice for parks. Everything's green and starting to bloom. Report from the museum committee. They just hired a part-time executive director. Everyone's very excited about that. She's going to be working on fundraising and partnerships and that type of thing. They also did an open house last weekend to recruit some new board members, get more people interested in becoming board members for the museum. They're doing a lot of May, I guess, is History Month or something like that. So they're doing the Petalumas of yesteryear, doing a bunch of tours. They're getting school groups in to tour through the museum, and we're going to march in the Butter and Eggs Parade. I'll be handing out postcards for the museum and the parade, and so they're doing a lot of stuff and really working on getting the museum set up for future success. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilperson Now.
Thank you. The museum, just to tag on to that, and the parade, is the museum truck going to be in it?
Yeah,
I think the Petalumans are mostly going to be riding, and then some of us will be walking alongside, handing
Okay.
out cards.
The museum truck is stored at my dad's hangar out at the airport. And Marshall West, who just recently passed away, he was always dressed as Mr. Wickersham and drove the egg truck. And it's the historic egg truck for Petaluma. Anyway, off topic. I happened to go to all my parks yesterday with my dog, and I have a bunch of photos to send to Drew. But the hand sanitizer stations are awesome, but they're not full anymore. So, and then over at Leghorn Park, there was signboards saying that the structure was closed, but I didn't know why. Nothing looked like it was broken, and I didn't want to bug the maintenance guys because I'd already found the parks guys working on a tree they were trying to make upright after that wind yesterday. And so Drew's going to look into it. But the parks look great. They some of the sandwich boards need to come out of there that said the park was closed because of water and flooding, which was just a week ago. And then there was a cute little display of sheep and a Transhumanist Festival. That's the grazing that's happening out at McNair Peninsula. Is so cool. It's 3-dimensional. It's with real wool. My dog was going nuts because it smells like a sheep. And it has the QR code to get all the information on the festival. It was in the Leghorn Park. It's a 3-dimensional structure of sheep in a circle. It's really cool. Anyway, so the question from the community I got is on the pickleball. I guess we resurfaced, but it's getting damaged by humans walking on it, dogs walking on it, and soccer being played kind of on it. So the pickleball people just wanted to make sure we knew that that was a concern. And I told them I'd bring it up. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner DeLuca?
Yes, my parks look great. Did you refer to the Westridge Park? Is that what you meant with the
No.
playground?
No, they're all east side.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just curious about the Westridge playground. I was just there again yesterday.
Yeah,
it's still
receiving
closed.
wood chips.
Yeah, are we close?
Yes, I believe I have a date on the wood chips. Cindy doesn't. Yeah, Cindy has the comments. We'll have the date. We're close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's not that I play there. It's just that when
I don't believe you. Yeah.
and otherwise, but all my parks look great. I mean, amazing. You guys amaze me all the time. And then at the tree committee today, everything's fine. But they're going to form an ad hoc committee, or they formed an ad hoc committee to address issues with the tree ordinance. So they're going to probably take that eventually to the city council. And I think it's actually a really good idea, and I'm happy for them because we really do need clarity on a tree ordinance. So that was a big step for them to decide to do that today. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I had one other question.
Okay.
That's okay. I noticed, I think it's at Sunrise Park along North McDowell, there's some construction staging on the park. Is that for the street construction or what's?
It's PG&E.
Okay. And are they going to pay for restoration of the area of the park that the staging is on?
Yes.
Good question.
And yeah, there was some trees, recently planted trees that need to be made whole. And that is a gas line related to the North McDowell project. So there'll be a while until that's remediated, and then we've been told we're gonna get a beautiful park back. So we'll have to stay on that.
I'm sure Relief will follow up because they had just planted those trees.
That's true, they did. Okay, parks looked good when I visited them before spring break, and then I went on a spring break trip and haven't been to a park since. I missed Bicycle and Ped because I was spring break, kids vacation, which is a bummer because they canceled the one before. So I look forward to this coming one. What else? I have a question about graffiti. Two questions about graffiti. One is there's graffiti, someone has now graffitied the dumpster at the swim center. Is that something you guys would want to paint over? Is that something you feel you can't control?
You know, we normally probably would not with dumpsters because we don't own them, but we'd reach out to Recology because it's property of them. But if it's something that's really offensive,
It wasn't offensive. It was
Okay.
just like one of those like, oh, I see this. Because it's part of the whole thing that I look at over there. and,
yeah.
walk
So
the
you
skate
could
park.
report it out to us, and then we can send it to Recology.
Okay. And then my other question, and this is way in advance, is about graffiti and the new skate park. Because really with skate parks, right, the preference would be to not have graffiti. And so at some point, I feel like there's going to need to be a lot of community outreach and billboards with flashing lights and arrows and cameras and community patrol. You know what I mean? So that's just a forewarning. I hope that'll be on our radar somehow to really get that community involved so that that skate park, I don't know, maybe like put a sign up that says, if you want to graffiti, go to the other skate park, right? Don't ruin the new
Or
one.
maybe put some graffiti walls up by the skate park and we could incorporate community art.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
I was going to say in San Francisco, there's a big skate park under the freeway and it's full of graffiti and they love it that way.
Yeah, but if we're like, here's a wall, and
Yeah.
like,
Oh, were you saying that the actual, the features? Yeah. I know, and that's, and this is something, I'm not a skater, but my understanding, and I think this will be maybe part of our outreach, right, is that while it's, people can say it's part of the culture, it actually makes the skating surface unsafe. It really makes it slick and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's a conundrum that I was thinking about when I saw I don't know why, whatever. Sometimes sparks fly at one point, but anyhow, and then I don't have any other updates. That's it.
Thank you. Before I introduce Cindy, it's just an interesting topic when we took the skate park item with the commissioner feedback to council. The design consultant Grindline, who is very well respected and renowned, was asked that question, knowing that our community's fairly split on the subject. There is graffiti that's art at the current site. It's been condoned. It's kind of part of the culture and the nostalgia, and so walking into that, the design firm was kind of asked that question, and how do you navigate? And, he was very clear that, they approached the site to keep the site free of graffiti for these reasons. However, there are a number of communities that have, different solutions that have been more successful or less successful, including that kind of sanctioned art piece. And so it's great that we're talking about it now, and I think it needs to be incorporated and talked about with each revision of the design. So I just wanted to let you be aware that was a good conversation at council, and I'm glad that the design consultant kind of has had boots on the ground, understands at least kind of the challenges that Petaluma faces as we open that conversation, that there's going to be two very animated sides about it.
Yeah, and that it is the type of thing when you go to other skate parks, right? If you're in Monterey, there's no graffiti.
Yeah,
right?
a
And
lot
so
of the new ones.
again, it's like it's on a park by park basis, really. And so I think that it's that, probably some sort of communication.
But I'm
yeah.
wondering if Petaluma's has just always had graffiti because it was built in the 90s, and that was definitely more what was happening in skate culture at that time, and it just forever has evolved into it. But all the new skate parks,
Yeah.
they're clean cement, and I'm always like, oh wow, look at that. So I don't know if it just because the
Right.
generation that park was built and what was happening at the time in
It could
in
very well
culture.
be, right?
So,
Right. Okay, so I think that rounds out committee comment. We have staff comment with Drew and Cindy.
Take it away, Cindy. Sorry.
Hello, Commissioners. It's been busy because we just had rain in March, so it's clearing up. But in between that time, Parks crew has been refurbishing park benches, picnic tables. You'll see that they did that at Leghorn, so they went through both the benches and the picnic tables. We'll get to McNair and the painting of those annually, so that'll happen now that it's starting to dry out. Outside of that, drinking fountains are going to start working on those and getting those back online. So at this time of year, generally we wait until the freezing temperatures overnight stop, and it's been colder longer, so they would have been online earlier, but we're starting that process now. And even though this week it's still supposed to dip down into the 30s overnight, we're just working on them now because generally they still need to be fixed before they come back online for the year. So that'll happen. I know that's much anticipated. I wanted to give an update on the Westridge Playground. So if you haven't been out there, if it's not your park, if you don't live in the neighborhood, there was a retaining wall, landscape retaining wall that was plastic pieces that had been broken apart and was not holding in that play sand. So we finally had that pulled out. We took out the sand, and there's now a concrete retaining wall, and the engineered wood chips should be coming next Friday. I think May 2nd, whenever that is. So that we'll go ahead and fill those in, and we can reopen that playground now that the weather's getting nicer. But it's huge because for the longest time, we'd been waiting to get that done with the trail. So we're really happy to kind of finish that up and open that back up to the community. And then the rest of the infill, so our annual kind of top off of the rest of our parks with the engineered wood chips will also happen at the same time. So you'll see that top up ready for the hot weather as the kids get back out into the playgrounds. Outside of that, tree committee is very busy, very active. We did set up a new ad hoc, and we'll be agendizing another ad hoc for the next meeting. As you know, from feedback from the committee members, they are really engaged with the tree ordinance process and just trees overall in Petaluma. So just know that they are really busy, and Mary Kate will say they're very passionate, they're very skilled, and so it's really nice to see that. Relief has been busy. We finished up our 6 parks by sheer effort because the rain really kind of threw that schedule off. So the parks team did come out for the last park and did help them out both at Southgate and at Meadowview. And they were very thankful for that help. But all those trees are planted, so our 6 parks are done and off to the planning for the next year. Relief is going to be busy. They did help Petaluma City Schools apply for a grant to green the 4 largest schools. So if they are awarded that grant, they'll be greening out Petaluma High School, Petaluma Middle School, Kenilworth, and Casa Grande. So that's, I think, they said it was somewhere between $2 to $3 million that they applied for. So that'll be a huge effect too, for our canopy. With the CAL FIRE grant, to give the Rec Commission an update, we are in review of proposals to do the tree inventory in the public spaces. This would be phase 1 of getting our urban forestry management plan in place. So we're just trying to get all of our ducks in a row, and hopefully we'll get the tree inventory done this summer. Outside of that, Arbor Day is the proclamation happened this last Monday at Council. Petaluma's official Arbor Day is Saturday, April 29th. If you're available, please come out. We will be in McNair Park on the 29th from 10 a.m. to noon, planting 3 trees. We're going to do 2 species of oaks and a pink fawn. Those are the non-technical terminology for the names of the trees. But we'd be happy to have you there. And then on Sunday the 30th, there is going to be a walk hosted by Relief through the east side where they've planted to kind of show what they've done and kind of the biodiversity and, kind of what they've done out there. So if you'd like to take part of that, I'm happy to send the flyer up so you can sign up. But a lot of things happening. Your turf maintenance is kicking into high gear, as most of you know. It's that season where your park staff gets really, really busy. So if you see them out and they look a little bit stressed, they probably are because they've got a lot on their plate, but they're moving full force ahead. So that's my update for the month. Thank you. It's part of the plan.
Thank you, Cindy. So just to close the loop on the wood chips, a lot of wood chips going around, and thank you for your patience. Please thank the people that reach out to you as we source a lot of these chips. But the Grant playground that was installed, that's, I think, the next one up. So that will receive chips either the end of this week or first part of next. The playground's been inspected, it's been improved. So the fencing will come down. They'll do some last minute cleanups, but that park will be open within a week. And then I believe Rachel and recreation staff have a community event, or we'll call it an opening ceremonies of that playground on May 3rd. So we'll start putting out some promos, and please help us spread the word, get the neighborhood out there just to enjoy the new park. And really it's about, activating that play space. So more details to follow, but May 3rd, that's that soft opening, and chips and fence will come down within a week. May 1st, we'll be taking the Anna's Meadows Playground project to City Council for an award, which is really exciting. Also exciting part of that project is it will include the design for the shade structure, which was supported by this commission. So, that kind of allowed us to take that input back, work that project in a way to find and creatively find a solution to building that as part of the project. So we're looking for support from the council on May 1st to move forward with the award of the Anna's Meadows Playground Replacement Project and a shade canopy that will be installed next to that. Changing gears to the whale mural, naturally. Thank you to Rachel, the recreation staff that coordinated with the Spring Hill School kindergarten class to paint a life-size chalk blue whale out here at City Hall parking lot. So maybe dark, you might not see the whale tonight, but just a really kind of fun event on a weekday. So thank you, Rachel and the crew, to collaborate on that project, but one that was kind of fun and timely. The chess tables that have been installed, that opening ceremonies or opening chess match April 29th. That will be a Saturday from 11 to 2 at Water Street. So please come by. There'll be some chess games going on, some interests from all folks. It's an age-friendly event, so it's there to kind of thank the sponsors, AARP, Senior Advisory Committee, staff who installed, and all of that fun stuff. So good time to be at the Paul Shar Bridge, April 29th. Another event, the Alchemy Inclusion Festival, is returning to Petaluma and be hosted on May 13th at the Petaluma Community Center. This is one of the events that broke our hearts to cancel initially in 2020, and they're coming back, and they'll take over the center. It's really about creating kind of inclusive programs, environments, play spaces. They're an incredible group of people and partners in the community, so more promotional outreach to follow, but please mark your calendar, May 13th. Come by the community center and kind of check out what the Alchemy Festival is all about. Thank you to all of you who weighed in and provided thoughtful input on this project, support of the departments, what we're doing, and really appreciate all of your time tonight. We owe you some follow-ups on the Leghorns Park. We'll have to get some information on the slide. And the pickleball folks, we're engaged with them on the regular, and we get those calls, and we are adjusting our signage. We're making sure those courts are busy so that there's little room to have a vacuum of any other unwanted activity. But there is a project underway to restripe some additional courts, tennis courts, to allow multi-use pickleball tennis. So that's one step further to accommodating some of these underutilized spaces to make sure that we're growing with the needs of the community. So that's underway here within a couple weeks too. And with that, that's my report. Thank you all.
Okay, so I believe that adjourns the meeting, right? I get to do the gavel.